everyone, and welcome to another episode of Little Give. Today we have Sherrie on, and although the name of this show is Little Give, she is doing some extraordinary gives around the world. So, Sherrie, why don't you tell the audience where you're from and what you're all about?
I live in Corpus Christi, Texas. My home is actually Kansas City. That's where my kids and my grandbabies are. And so eventually I'll make my way back there. But right now I live in very South Texas, Corpus Christi. And I have the honor of traveling all over the U.S. and internationally, going on site into law enforcement departments. And I train on being trauma informed so that they're better to work with a victim of a sex crime.
Wow. Like I said a minute ago, I know what you're doing is such a big give all around the world. Can you tell the audience how you got started with this mission?
Sure. It was not something that I really set out to do. Because I have a life that was trauma filled, I don't think that I have much to give. And that's typical for most trauma victims. We feel like we're filled with guilt, shame, and humiliation, and we don't have a lot to give the world. I started very small. A small group of people asked me to come and speak to them, and I really couldn't figure out why they wanted me to speak to them because I'm a nobody. I'm not college educated. And then another little group, and then another little group, until I found myself speaking to colleges. Sexual assault on a college campus is running rampant, so I was invited to speak there. And then I was invited to educate their law enforcement. That was very scary because I don't know anything about law enforcement. I'm not law enforcement. I'm just a civilian. That group of law enforcement officers was so gracious to me, and they welcomed me like I'm family. And then I started putting all of my focus into law enforcement. And that's been 8 years ago that I started. And so now I just do law enforcement full time.
Wow, that is incredible. You mentioned that you had dealt with some self-limiting beliefs in the beginning, found like, how am I going to do this? I'm nobody. How did you overcome those so that you could actually fulfill your purpose?
It's a work in progress. It's still every day. I still fight those old tapes that play in my head about who I am and what I'm worth and my self-worth and my value. But every time that I speak in front of a group of law enforcement, last week I was in Little Rock, Arkansas at a CALEA conference. CALEA is it's a law enforcement conference. And if you're CALEA certified in law enforcement, you've kind of reached the top of the top. It's the gold standard for law enforcement. So I was speaking there, and they gave me such incredible feedback. And so many of them have invited me on site to do training to their department. And that's what keeps me going. And that's what makes me think, okay, maybe I do have something to offer. And maybe all this lived experience is worth something. And so it's the constant affirmation that I get from law enforcement and the constant of them welcoming me into their group, even though I'm an outsider. And that's what keeps me going.
Oh, I love it. I love when people take their pain and they turn it into purpose to help others. And that's certainly something you've done. Why don't you share with us a bit about the things that you share with law enforcement that's really helped them move the needle in their work?
Well, according to the FBI, from the time that a law enforcement officer enters the academy until the time that he hangs up his belt and retires, all across their career, the average law enforcement officer gets 2 hours of training in sexual assault, just 2. Then we hand them our most vulnerable population and say, here you go, fix this. And they want to do a fabulous job. Law enforcement always wants to do a great job, but for sex crimes, they're not really educated, and they don't understand how trauma presents. And trauma presents sometimes so oddly that people don't catch that it's trauma. They think maybe that someone's lying, or they're exaggerating, or they made it up, or they whatever. So I get to go in and give them an interactive 8-hour class that I built, and I'm so incredibly proud of that, and get to show them examples of trauma and how to better interview and to stay away from the W's. Don't ask a sex crime victim who, what, where, when, and why, because we don't know. Trauma doesn't allow you to pick those pieces up, but talk about the senses, because we can do that. We can tell you what we felt, heard, smell. So those are some of the things that we do. I have a partner that partners with me when I go on site into law enforcement. He's a retired New Jersey law enforcement officer. He's also has a history of childhood trauma. So together, we have this really powerful team. We can talk to male officers. We can address female officers. We can talk about male victims and female victims. And that's my partner. That's Kevin Donaldson. And he's a fabulous asset to me. And I'm so thankful that he has joined this journey with me.
Yeah, it's amazing when you meet the right people who can help support your goals and you can help support their goals and really just, make the world a better place. You talked a lot about law enforcement and how they only had that minimum amount of training. What do you think is the most valuable part of what you're sharing with them that really helps them be more trauma informed?
Well, I think for 8 hours, they get to watch me. I used to try very hard to hide my trauma, all my trauma isms that I do that are a fallout from carrying all this trauma. But what I discovered was that if I'll just let all that go and just let that fly out there for everybody to see, then they can see what I want them to notice when they're working with a victim of a sex crime. They can see that we don't make eye contact. Now, in the law enforcement world, they're taught that if you're working with a victim who doesn't make eye contact, that they're lying. So we put a whole bunch of myths to bed. That's not true. The reason that trauma victims are not making eye contact with you is because we're filled with guilt, shame, and humiliation. And so we don't make eye contact. And that's something that I work on every single day, is making eye contact. So after they listen to me talk and tell my story for a couple of hours, I will ask them, what did you notice about me that would lead you to believe that I'm a trauma victim? And then I just let them see, you don't make eye contact. You lose your place. All of the crazy things that we do because we've been in survival mode for so long. So I think just letting it be on display, I tell them up front, I have complex PTSD. You're going to watch me lose my place. You're going to watch me struggle to find words. So I just let it be real and let them see it for themselves.
Yeah, I think seeing is believing, and actually, knowing that you are telling the truth and seeing how you're behaving, they can take that straight to an interview and kind of, fill it out in a totally different way, which is, I think it's incredible that you've even thought to do something like this, because it's so vital in these moments. So as they're, interviewing these victims, is there any feedback that you received that you thought was interesting that law enforcement gave you as you're speaking with them?
I think one of the biggest things that they tell me, and I have taught from the West Coast to the East Coast and all in between, and I've done international gigs. But what I hear from law enforcement routinely is that I make them rethink all the cases, all the sex crime cases that they've worked and how badly they screwed them up. And that's not my goal. That's not my point at all. And they also tell me, Sherrie, every law enforcement officer in the US needs to sit under your class. Now, that's a huge compliment. I'm here for that. Let's make that happen. So knowing that I'm making them rethink the cases that they've worked, and knowing that they value my expertise on this subject enough to think that every law enforcement officer and agency needs to have me in, those are two huge compliments that keep me going.
Hi, my name is Justin Clark, and I'm the president of the Board of Directors for Driving Single Parents, a 501c3 nonprofit serving the citizens of San Antonio and Bexar County, Texas. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the great work that our organization is doing for the citizens of San Antonio. What you're about to see is just a few photos and videos of the way that we're changing lives for single parents in and around San Antonio, Texas. Our first giveaway took place in April of 2017, just one short month after the formation of our organization. John, a Bexar County resident, was the victim of a horrible drunk driver incident. He and his daughter survived the crash, and we were so proud to give our first car to this deserving family. Fast forward to 2020, a very difficult year for nonprofits. we were able to secure 4 vehicles for single parents in need. Our organization, including our board of directors, list of partners, and portfolio of people we've been able to help in San Antonio, continues to grow, and it's all thanks to donors and local community organizations that have helped us along the way. This giveaway took place in 2021 and shows that we continue to help single parents even after the struggles brought about by COVID-19. Because of limited funds and the overwhelming need, we at Driving Single Parents are incredibly selective with the people we help. Some are victims of domestic violence. Others had a spouse pass away tragically or otherwise fell on hard times. These single parents show adversity in the face of challenge and aren't looking for a handout. We offer a hand up and help get them back in the driver's seat. Many of the single parents we help go on to graduate college, get promotions, get married, mentor others, and some have even been so touched by the gift we gave them that they have decided to join our board of directors to pay it forward and ensure the continued growth of our organization. If you would like to help our organization continue to grow and continue to help single parents in need in San Antonio, Texas, and Bexar County, Texas, we would really appreciate your support. Please visit us online at www.drivingsingleparents.org. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Especially since it's such a unique thing that you're doing that really can help somebody not just listen to what you're saying, but see it. I think that's just seeing is believing. And that's a lot of just, getting to really see the root of what's actually happening in the victim's mind. So I think it's amazing what you're doing. So whenever you're in a group full of, and is it predominantly men, or you have mostly men and women who you're speaking to?
It's probably 80% men, 20% women. I don't know that statistic to be the gospel, but that's just my quick off the cuff opinion.
Yeah. So how do you feel in doing this work? Obviously being a survivor yourself and having to stand in a room full of eyes on you and share your truth. How is that for you?
It's hard to stand in front of a group of people you don't know, whether it's a group of 50 or 500, and tell your deepest, darkest secrets that you spent your life carrying and holding close and not telling anyone. And now I'm in a position where I just tell the whole world. A lot of times they're speechless and they'll tell me that. A lot of times they apologize. I just had a chief of police come up to me in Little Rock last week to apologize for having such a wonderful childhood. And that is never what I want. I wish everyone had a wonderful childhood. I know that I'm giving them something of value and they reciprocate that to me. So I don't ever feel judged or humiliated or less than or unaccepted by them. They're so very gracious to open their arms and let me in their circle.
Wow. I actually wrote a book about a lot of the things that I've grown through in my life. And I found it to be, of course, in the moment as you're writing out these things, it's a little bit re-traumatizing in a way, but afterwards it's kind of almost like therapy, like a release. Have you ever experienced that whenever you're giving these talks to where, you've told your story and it's helping other people and now you can kind of feel a little bit more peace?
Well, normally it always makes me extremely exhausted because I'm hashing up and reliving all of these things that I tell them so that I can better equip them to do their job. But each time from when I started to where I am now, certainly I'm able to tell my story with greater detail. And it doesn't, I don't cry when I tell my story, which would not be beneficial to law enforcement if I cried when I tell my story. So sometimes I have to explain to them, you're going to see me not be emotional. And that's not because it doesn't hurt or it doesn't affect me anymore, but because I'm no good to you if I become emotional as I tell you my story. So I start out telling them that. Don't think just because I'm not crying doesn't mean that it doesn't affect me. But I am so desperate for them to understand victims of sex crimes that it's worth putting myself through that.
Oh, thank you for doing this work. It's just amazing. And it's helping so many people. You know, there's so many people who are involved when something like this happens to someone, the friends, the family, the people around, also law enforcement and taking those reports and all the things we spoke about already. What is the thing that you would tell a family member or a friend who maybe notices that their loved one is acting a little differently, or, you know, they think something might have happened or did happen? What is your recommendation for that?
That's a really hard question because we all process our trauma so differently and we don't act the same. You know, some of us withdraw and become very quiet. Mine was childhood incest. So in my case as a child, I became very, very quiet and very withdrawn. I thought if I could be tiny enough and invisible enough and quiet enough that people would forget that I was there. Then on the other side, you have people like Kevin, who became very boisterous, very mischievous, and did a lot of things for attention and a lot of bullying. And so the residual of trauma goes so many different directions, and we all heal and begin our healing journey at different times in our life. So for me, the first time I told anyone, I was 35. But the average age for an incest survivor to tell anyone is 52. So we carry this life of guilt, shame, and humiliation until the average age of 52 before we ever tell anyone.
Wow. The work that you're doing is so necessary, because I feel like the more that we can share and make it okay to share and tell, you know, whenever you're ready, it's just such a hard line to walk. I can imagine with you, you know, having to share your story time and time again with people you don't know, and then law enforcement getting these aha moments. It's just got to make you feel like you're really fulfilling the mission that you have set out to do with your nonprofit and all the things that you're working towards. What is it that made you decide, I'm going to start a nonprofit and do this?
Well, I kind of really didn't. I am married to a man named Gary. I've been married 23 years, and he's a brilliant businessman. And so when the first little group and then the second little group and then the third little group asked me to come and educate them, and Gary said, Sherrie, this is going to get bigger than you, and I want you to do this right. And at the time, I remember thinking that was the dumbest thing he'd ever said, and I really didn't even know what that meant, get bigger than me. And he said, I want you to start your own nonprofit. And I said, I defaulted to what I believe is that I'm dumb, stupid, ugly, fat, worthless, and because that's what I was told my whole life. So I said, oh my gosh, Gary, I think you forgot that I can't do that. I didn't get to go to college, and I'm dumb and I'm stupid. And he said, well, first of all, you're not dumb and stupid. And you might not be able to do that, but I can help you. And so it was with his encouragement and his guidance that I started this nonprofit. And he said, you'll need a board to help you make decisions. And I had to think long and hard about who do I trust to go on this journey with me, that I'm walking down a road I don't even know how to walk down or what the directions are. And that's been, I think, 8 years ago. And my little nonprofit that was just me telling my story, now I get to just tell my story all over, and I get to travel, and I get to meet amazing people. And that's how it started. That's how my nonprofit started, because Gary was smart enough to say, hey, Sherrie, I can see around the corner here, and this is going to get really big. And he was right.
Hi, my name is Andrew Fraley, and I believe that sometimes we all need a little bit of help. If you're in the San Antonio community and you need some legal help, call me at 210-725-4658.
Oh my goodness. It's so wonderful to have those people who are around you that believe in you, trust you, and know that, hey, I'm here for you and I can help you in the ways that you're not ready. I love that. And so whenever you decide to do the nonprofit, you're like, who can I trust and what do I have to do next? How was that? How did you decide the name? I founded a nonprofit, so I know how special these moments are. So how did you come up with what name you would choose? How did you decide like the mission statement, all the details?
The name was hard. I threw around tons of names, as I'm sure you did with your nonprofit. And then I was in Georgia and I was speaking at a college, and I had a very seasoned chief of police come up to me afterwards and wanted to ask me some questions at the college. And as I was leaving that day from the college and from meeting this guy, I remember thinking to myself, that took a lot of courage for someone like him, educated, brilliant, seasoned law enforcement officer, to come up to somebody like me who knows nothing about law enforcement and ask me questions. And so as I'm driving in my car, in my rental car, I'm thinking, man, that took a lot of courage. And then I thought, but it takes a lot of courage for me to stand in front of strangers and tell my story. And that's when I kind of had this light bulb moment that courage starts with you. It started with me having the courage to tell my story. It started with a chief of police having the courage to come up and admit to someone like me, listen, I don't have all the answers. You're the expert. How do I run a better police department? And then every police department and every law enforcement officer and every sheriff whom I've had the honor to work for, they have a lot of courage to depend on someone like me to take advice from and education from. And so that's how I came up with it, because it starts with all of us.
I love the name. I really do. And you're right. It does always start with the courage is, within us. And so the fact that, the officers are even willing to hear you out, it's so good that the egos aren't in the way and they're like, how can we be better?
How
can
know,
we help
right?
victims?
I love that.
Isn't that's just, to me, that's just like wonderful and amazing that they're willing to put their ego at the door, check it at the door, and really listen to you to teach them how to be a better officer. And that's what we need. We just need more people who are willing to see it differently. And so I'm so grateful that you do this work. And so as you've gone through all these things, you've started all this, I love your story so much because you started off feeling like you weren't good enough, and you started off feeling that sense of, who am I, and then yet here you are today with making this huge impact. So I just know the audience watching right now can get that message from you, that the courage starts with them, right? And that no matter what self-limiting beliefs you have, you can work through it, you can grow through it, and you can help other people. And so that's one of the things I just absolutely love about you and your story.
And no matter what your trauma was, it doesn't have to be a sex crime. It could be domestic violence. It could be losing a child. I certainly can't counsel someone who's lost a child. I don't know what that feels like. I've never lost a child. So it depends. It's not just solely sex crimes. We all have something that we've endured, whether it's a divorce, whether it's losing a parent, whatever it is. And that holds so much more value than what you read about in a book.
That's so true.
I talk about suicide because I'm a suicide attempt survivor, and I've spoken at suicide conferences, and I have people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, you talk about this so differently than the professors. Well, likely they have never been in their kitchen floor trying to kill themselves, and I have. So when you're drawing from your own experience, and we all have those experiences, and that's how we turn around and help the person behind us and reach out a hand and say, I don't have all the answers, but I've been there. Although I always tell people, don't ever say you've been there. Don't ever tell anyone how they feel if you haven't. For instance, losing a child, I would never say to someone, I know how that feels, because I don't. But that's what gives us the ability to reach back and help the next person. And that's what I believe that we're here for, is to take whatever we've lived through that was so traumatic and we didn't know how we were going to live through it, but we did, and then help the next person.
Yes, everybody has the ability to take their own pain and turn it into purpose to help the next person. And I love what you said, that, we can never really say, we know exactly what you're going through, because no matter what, I'm a domestic violence survivor, and I know that the person who are people that I encounter who are domestic violence survivors or are going through that my story is my story and their story is theirs. And although I can relate in some ways, I never can truly understand exactly what they're going through. But I do believe, like you said, it does help to have somebody there who says, I have a similar lived experience and that this is, how I grew through it. Maybe that'll help that person. And I also agree with what you said when you said we are equipped to help the person that we once were. And I just love that you're taking this time, energy, and all of your efforts to really help on the big picture, because of course, helping those survivors one-on-one is just incredible in itself, but helping the people who have the ability to help the survivors, like the law enforcement that you're helping, really does give you that reach much broader than it would to just be one-on-one. So I think what you're doing is just truly, truly incredible and such a big give.
Thank you. It's probably been 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I decided to go to college. I had 2 years of college, but I wanted to be a therapist, a marriage and family therapist really bad because I had a really good marriage and family therapist. Shout out to Marilyn Brown. And she saved my life multiple times. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I got enrolled at Texas A&M. And because of my mental health issues, I couldn't do the work that was required to do. And unfortunately, I had to just drop out. And I was devastated and broken, and all of those tapes that play that I am so dumb and so stupid and so worthless were just all front and center in my mind. And I believed that they were all true because my lifelong goal was to be a therapist. And I think we have to fail in what we think we want to be before we can get where we're usable for God to put us on this journey of where he wants us to be. And so I often think, if Sherrie would have had her way, I'd be sitting in an office seeing one person at a time. But look what God did. He took that failure and set me on this path now where I speak to hundreds of people at a time. And I get to educate on this really grand scale. And so, I think I took that as a personal failure for a long time. So if you're not doing what you think you want to be doing, then my advice to you was, but are you doing what God wants you to do? Because God has opened doors that I could have never opened. His ways are always so much bigger than our ways. And so, don't be defeated by the failures, but just take them and learn from them and use them as a launching pad to get to where you're supposed to be.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer that there's no win or lose. It's either win or learn. And I think that I've done a lot of learning in my life.
Yes.
As we all have, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a failure. Can you give the audience an example of a little thing that they can do in their community that might just be a little give on their end, but might make a big impact on the other side?
I can. I have two nonprofits. Courage Starts With You is me going out and speaking, but under the umbrella of my nonprofit, I also have another one called Matthew 25:40, which is one of my favorite Bible verses. What you do for the least of these, you do for me. And I just really messed that up. So look that up, Matthew 25:40. And for the last probably 11 years, my husband and I have gone to the streets every Thursday night of Corpus Christi, and we work with the homeless population. Now, I know that we cannot solve homelessness, and that is not why God sends us out there. But I take clean and used bra, socks, and underwear, soap, feminine products, things that we all take for granted. And every Thursday night, Gary takes the men's things, men's socks, underwear, and a t-shirt. And we take a razor and we go out and do life with our homeless friends. We can't solve their problems, but for the couple of hours, they know where we're going to be. We've been in the same place forever and ever. But for the couple of hours that we're there and we're with them, and we make it a point to call them by their name because no one calls them by their name. We, as a society, tend to turn our head away so we don't have to look. But something as simple as a clean used bra and a clean pair of underwear, or even just take bottled water out and pass it out in your town, or take it to some bras to your pregnancy center. But for me, it's on Thursday nights. And my husband, Gary, the brilliant businessman, many, many, many years ago, way before I ever met him, was homeless. And I think that's where this came from. We only intended to do it one time, and now we're, I think, 12 years in. So the things that we take for granted, other people need so desperately. And I often think how humiliating it must be to ask someone you don't know for feminine products that you need, just like the rest of us need them. So that's how you can make a small difference in your community, is just look around, see what the need is. And it doesn't have to be on a grandiose scale, even if it's just going out and passing out bottled water. Just start somewhere, but just start.
I love that. Great example. Just start. Just that little bitty thing means it's just a small thing for you, but really, really makes an impact on the other side. So great example. Can you give the audience an example of a time in your life where somebody did something little for you that might have just been a little give on their end, but really made an impact on you and in your life?
When I first started speaking, it's probably been 5 or 6 years ago when I was really, really amping up my law enforcement. I was speaking at the National Sheriff's Association in Washington, D.C. And it was really a big deal for me. I'm just a girl from Kansas who didn't get to go to college, to be speaking in this room filled with sheriffs and other people from the sheriff's department. And I felt small and intimidated, but I didn't let that show. And I told them what I needed them to know. And as I left that room, my conference room in DC, and I stepped out the door, I had a man approach me and said, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to tell me all the things that I'm doing wrong. And who do I think I am that I can educate law enforcement when I am not a law enforcement officer? And so we stepped around the corner. He asked me to step around the corner, which we did. And he said, "I want to tell you something. I've been a sheriff for 30 some years. I should know definitive because I love this man so much." And he said, "I've been to more of these conferences than I can even begin to tell you, but I have never, ever sat under anyone like you. And what do I have to do to get you to come to my sheriff's department?" And his name is Sheriff Craig Weber, and he's in Lafourche Parish in Thibodaux, Louisiana. And that year, within a few months, I was at his sheriff's department, and I've gone back every year after that. And he didn't have to take the time to stop me. He didn't have to speak life into me, but he did. And I am forever grateful to that. And it probably meant nothing to him, but to me, it was everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a beautiful story. And, that gave you even more courage to continue and go out. And that one little thing to say, you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right work, just had to have meant so much to you.
It did.
Oh, it's beautiful.
He's one of my favorite people. Very kind man.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, again, I love the work you're doing. Why don't you tell the audience if they want to get to know more about you and all you're working towards, your nonprofit, all the things, can you give them all the details?
Sure. You can find me at my website, which is sherrieallsup.com. And my name is spelled weird. It's SherrieAllsup.com. That's my website. I think you can also reach it by couragestartswithyou.com. So if you can only remember the name of my website or my nonprofit, you can also find it that way. My email is just my name, Sherrie at SherrieAllsup, SherrieAllsup at SherrieAllsup.com. And you can find me, all of my information is plastered all over there. You can find me on Instagram. I think it's the Sherrie Allsup on Instagram because somebody else already had my name. LinkedIn, I'm in all the places.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing your story with us today, and for all the work you're doing to improve law enforcement and what they're working towards to help more victims out there. So we appreciate you coming on today. And for everybody out there who's watching, go to her website, find out more, and see how you can get involved. We appreciate you being on today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to everybody who's watching, we'll see you all next week. If you enjoyed this episode of Little Give, head on over to our website. At littlegive.com, you'll be able to find all the information about previous episodes and past guests that we've had on. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest on Little Give, all the information is also on the website. And if you have a nonprofit that you love and would like to recommend be on the show, all of that information is also on the website. We really appreciate you watching today, and we can't wait to see you again next week.